made available to you since it will be recorded. The presentations that happen today will also be made available to you. Just shoot me an email and I'll go ahead and send them out to you. The presentations from the other webinars are also available. You just need to ask me in an email. All of the videos are on the COVID-19 NACI website resource page. This one will also be provided at that location. If you're on a telephone, you can mute and unmute yourself using *6. If you're on a computer and it's a Mac, it's Command D to mute and unmute. And if it's a PC, it's Control D to mute and unmute. Again, place your questions in queue in the chat and they'll be taken in the order in which they received. Kelly Jo is our first presenter. Kelly Jo will introduce herself and do her presentation. And her presentation will be followed by Nicole, then Meg, then Linda. And in between, I'll go ahead and give reminders. So Kelly Jo, if you could please take it away. Thank you all for joining us.
Sure. Hi, my name is Kelly Jo Shebeck. I am a McKinney-Vento liaison, a school liaison for the Clark County School District in Las Vegas. And I'm actually going to be sharing a presentation with Meg Pike. We're going to do it together. We work in the same office, and Meg is the community McKinney-Vento liaison for the Clark County School District. So let me try to pull up my webinar. Give me 1 second. Are we seeing that?
Not yet.
Okay.
While Kelly Jo is pulling up her presentation, just a quick reminder, telephone *6 mutes and unmutes. On a computer, Command D for a Mac and Control D for a PC to mute and unmute. And you can place your questions in queue in the chat. We do see presentation coming up.
There you go. Okay, and Meg?
Well, it says that you have presentation, but we don't see your screen yet.
It says it's sharing my screen.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Meg Pike. I'm the community liaison for the Clark County School District in Las Vegas, Nevada. And Kelly Jo, like you said, we're going to share this presentation this afternoon or this morning, depending on what time zone you're in.
And just 1 second, Meg. If while Meg's talking, Kelly Jo, if you can mute and vice versa. Thank you.
Go ahead. Okay. So we wanted to let you know a little bit about our school district as a whole. It is the 5th largest school district in the nation. It covers almost 8,000 square miles. And it ranges from highly urban to highly rural in one school district. And it is the entire county, so it sort of is, it presents its own challenges day by day. And then what makes Southern Nevada unique? There are 5 jurisdictions, and you know, this doesn't always come into play, but recently with the COVID-19 and response to this virus, this is a huge piece of what makes us unique, because we've got the county, we've got the city of Las Vegas, we've got the city of Henderson, we've got North Las Vegas, and we've got Boulder City all in the same county. And they're all jurisdictions that are getting their own funding, and it presents challenges in the community when you're trying to figure out what to do with those funds, whether it's HUD or ESG, CARES Act funds. what are those jurisdictions going to do with those funds, and then collaborate together to make sure that you're not double dipping or, you know, duplicating services, or if you do need to duplicate services, which ones are those within your communities. Everybody knows Vegas is reliant on tourism. We're an entertainment city. The picture you're seeing is a pretty recent picture of the Las Vegas Strip. If you've ever been here, you know that is not a common sight for the Las Vegas Strip to be completely empty. It's daunting. And we're a 24-hour city. There are students and parents that have to deal with 24-hour work schedules. And then transportation is an issue already in this city and this region. And now it's even more of an issue. I'm sure many cities are dealing with this across the nation. Buses are on Sunday schedules, so they're not running as normally as they would. And it's hard for people to get around. And then on top of that, since we are shut down and so many people do rely on jobs that aren't happening right now, they don't have the money to keep putting gas in their car. They don't have money to keep going places. So it is, and I know this is happening nationwide, but those do seem to make us a little bit unique as far as the 24-hour town and the entertainment part of it. So what makes CCSD unique? So looking at the school district, we are one county, one school district. Like I said, we range from rural to very urban service needs in the school district. We service 364 schools, over 321,000 students. There are over 42,000 school district employees. So when we're talking about not just servicing students, but delivering professional development, we're looking at delivering it to those 42,000 employees, not to mention just 18,000 of those are teachers. And then our number last year for McKinney-Vento students that were identified, we identified 13,844 students within the Clark County School District under McKinney-Vento. Sorry. Kind of looking at the timeline of what happened here in Southern Nevada. So CCSD, the school district, closed March 16th. And then we increased participation in community meetings. So informing Title I Hope guidance to schools. So we're Title I Hope. So we were trying to make sure that we were increasing guidance to school personnel that we work with on a regular basis to service those students. Awareness of referrals and the process in the community. Do we need to look at that? How was that going to move forward? And then collecting resources. I think everybody is ramping this up, trying to make sure we know exactly what's going on in the community so that we can make sure that people experiencing homelessness have those resources at their fingertips. And if they don't, that we do, so that we can make sure we can facilitate that. Sending communication to school advocates. So school advocates usually are counselors or social workers that work at the school level. They work directly with our program, and making sure that they have the resources they need, the information to those that they can hand out to teachers and other people, administrators, to make sure that when they are communicating with families, they know that there are services available if families need them. Why don't you just keep going? Okay. So student residency form is the form that we use to identify students. So trying to make sure that those school personnel have access to that, and they know that we're still identifying students for this current school year. And then, so then on that side of the timeline is the CCSD, and then looking at the community, you know, it was a huge impact for Southern Nevada for the strip to be closed. It's unfathomable how this could all create such a ripple effect moving forward too. So no casinos are open, no conventions are happening. As of April 24th, 370,000 people filed for unemployment here, which is 17% and the highest rate ever in Nevada history. I know other communities are dealing with that too. It's just daunting to figure out, you know, how that's going to play into the future of Southern Nevada and the future of our particular program. So childcare right now, a lot of students don't need childcare, they're at home, but the childcare agencies are prioritizing for first responders and healthcare workers. And then a week after the strip closed, all the shelters went into lockdown. So people cannot leave, or if they do leave a shelter, they're not allowed to come back because they don't want to infect other people at the shelter. So that's created some barriers as well. You just want me to keep going? Oh, okay. I wonder if I can. So some barriers, that's not the next slide though, is it? Some barriers that we have found are challenges with distance learning. It's hard to get devices out to, you know, 320,000 some odd students. I know schools are working on this. The district has also made sure that they're purchasing more devices to get out to students. The adjustment in service model from work to home, I think for everybody has been a huge adjustment. How do we deliver the services that we normally deliver in this climate? So the information flow, it looks different. It's different on a daily basis. And then orders and deliveries that we would normally be doing are not happening. And then the other part of distance learning is really access to Wi-Fi. So not everybody has Wi-Fi. So it's one thing to give everybody a device and make sure that they have access to their teachers and that communication. But if somebody doesn't have access to Wi-Fi, that means you either need to provide that Wi-Fi service or a hotspot. So I know that the local cable company has been providing a limited time service at no charge. And I think some people are trying to look into how do we extend that. But school for us does end at the end of May. So at least hopefully it could be extended through the end of May to help facilitate that distance learning. Communicating with families and youth has been difficult. The capacity of our program to try and do that and the capacity with the district as a whole has presented some challenges. I know schools are reaching out to families and students. And so like I said, we're trying to just piggyback off that and communicate with our advocates so that when they are communicating with students and families, they can then, you know, make sure that they're asking questions. And if they need our services, we can do that on a case-by-case basis. And then, you know, we were talking about how normally what happens is, you know, a parent would drop their kids off at school and the parent would go to the front office and say, you know what, I need some clothing or I need school supplies. Well, that's not happening because the opportunity to ask for that is not really happening either. It's not as easy as walking into an office at a school and just saying, this is what I need, or, having somebody right there in front of your face. It's making a phone call, or, I even think that people are just so overwhelmed right now that those kinds of things may not even be on their minds. So trying to respond to those barriers and respond to those needs, CCSD set up food distribution sites at the schools. They're handing out 2 meals a day at 67 sites. And then along with that, there are 3 station casinos locally that are designated as food distribution sites. So some families are able to get that by walking, or some of them have cars, but it does present barriers for some people at the same time. The Chromebook distribution, they did prioritize high school seniors for that device distribution. And then they also distributed packets of paper, like paper pencil work, that are still being distributed at those meal distribution sites. So students have access to that as well. And then increased communication with shelters and community agencies. I cannot even tell you how much this has ramped up. And then it's that direct families to directing those families to our program so that we can try and assist however we can. Lots of referrals happening. So community engagement and current operations, like I said, so we have a full-time staff member that deals with shelters. So she's the main contact for shelters. When somebody enters a shelter, she makes sure they're enrolled in school. She makes sure that she issues school of origin and transportation as needed, as well as getting supplies to those families. So that has really helped. She has been extremely busy. We are getting more and more requests for Chromebooks and hotspots. We are trying our best to really put through one order so that we can distribute those directly to shelters, so that if shelter students cannot get to those schools to get those devices, that we just have some on hand to give to the shelters. So that's in the works, and we're hoping that comes through quickly. Really widening that net of communication with agencies and nonprofits. I can't tell you how helpful this has been, all the way from the federal level and receiving guidance from the federal level by attending lots of webinars, or even just talking to and attending meetings with the COC locally. Knowing what's going on has been very comforting, and it's given us a lot of information to distribute to our staff as well. So we've gotten updates on coordinated entry sites and shelter protocol. Knowing that shelters are on lockdown, we have to know that so that we can try and help however we can. And then service delivery updates. One of the things that that has been really great is the local service providers and shelters kind of came together in the very beginning and figured out a central distribution site and one service provider that has staff that will then distribute goods out to shelters and service providers. So we took a bunch of hygiene kits there and made sure that they got distributed out to shelters and service providers from there. That's been really helpful. We can't do that with everything, but it has been really helpful in general to the community. So expanding communication with nonprofits, like I said, has been huge. I actually have been able to kind of worm my way into a weekly meeting with United Way of Southern Nevada. If you have a United Way in your community, I would highly recommend getting a hold of them. They are all working really hard across the country to create new agents, or help create new agencies and promote new agencies. One of them in our community, well, a couple different ones in our community are around food distribution. So delivering food to people that can't get out or that are caring for a COVID positive person in their house. They've done all kinds of work around food delivery to those families. Just keep going. So we're looking at current program status. We're doing our best to continue to identify eligible students for this current school year. Like I said, there's about a month left of school, but we're doing our best to make sure that during those meetings that we're attending in the community, we make sure that people know, just a reminder, we're still identifying kids under our program. So just trying to get that out to everybody. And then exploring online identification to prepare for continued stay-at-home orders. So what does it look like to identify and enroll students if, I hate to say it, if we don't end up back in our school buildings in the fall? Or even as the summer progresses, when we would normally be identifying students for the following fall, what does that look like? Continuing to collect resource information and distribute that to the advocates at the schools, as well as our staff, making sure our staff is well informed so that they can make those determinations as well for those advocates. And then consider innovative and alternative ways to provide services. What does this look like as we try and do what we normally do, which we can't? So seeking approval for Purposity, which we're really hoping we can get that online. I don't know if you guys know what Purposity is, but basically it's a way that people could put a need out there, and then community agencies or donors could fill those needs. So if I'm a student and I need a backpack, then I could put that online and a donor could fulfill that need. It's completely anonymous. It would be shipped directly to that student. So we're really hoping that we can get that pushed through. I think it would be great now and as we move forward. And then methods of online communication with families. So what does that look like? We're not on the phone with people as we always were. We're all at home. So we're trying to protect our employees to make sure that they're not giving out their personal cell numbers or their personal landline numbers all the time. What does that look like? What are our options so that we can start really deep diving down and making sure that that is all happening within our program? Okay, questions?
Thank you so much, Megan, Kelly, Joe. We'll take questions in the chat box after everyone is done presenting. Just a couple more things. I went ahead and put the link for Purposity in the chat. For those of you who are interested in checking out Purposity, one of our board members of NACCE is the co-founder of Purposity.
Not worried about it.
And was also highlighted on the Today Show just this past week for what they're doing during this outbreak. Also, an additional resource, Boys and Girls Clubs of America throughout the nation received a large grant from Coca-Cola Foundation to allow for meal delivery. So for those of you throughout the country who may be experiencing difficulty in getting meals to some students, Boys and Girls Clubs is specifically going out to addresses and doing meal delivery. On connectivity, some additional resources throughout the country. I know Austin, Texas is putting buses in various locations with internet on the bus so that students are able to access connectivity. Some schools and also some community centers are also allowing students to go into parking lots and access Wi-Fi during the outbreak. those are some additional resources. Thank you so much to both of you for your presentations. We'll also be hearing from them again at the end with final thoughts. But now, Linda, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself and start your presentation, and then we'll lastly have Nicole.
Okay. Hi, everybody. How's all my peeps from McKinney-Vento? Hope everybody's doing well out there. My name is Linda Fitzgibbons, and I am the director of the McKinney-Vento pre-K and pre-K program at the Nye County School District. And I don't have a presentation because I think the majority of the things that Kelly Jo and Meg talked about are very similar for us, but I do want to give you a snapshot of what our district looks like, because even though we're only 60 miles outside of Las Vegas, we might as well be hundreds and hundreds of miles outside of Las Vegas in that sense. We are a rural district, although we are also considered a remote rural district. The reason I say that is because we have 5,400 students that are actually total students in Nye County with identified numbers. We actually ended up with only 382 students that were identified at the end of last year. Obviously, much more were identified, but that's how many we ended up with. We only have 16 schools here in Nye County, 2 of which are one-room schoolhouses, so you don't hear of that very often anymore. We are the 3rd largest school district in the continuous United States. So I think, Meg, you said that I can't remember, I think you said that you were right around 9,000 square miles. To put that in perspective, Nye County is over 18,000 square miles. So you could fit several small states within just the county of Nye. So of course, the distance is always a huge issue for us. One thing that is that we have to deal with here, and I was kind of jealous when I heard that that you had shelters. Nye County does not have any shelters. As a matter of fact, the only shelter that we had was recently closed down, and that was a domestic violence shelter. So we actually have no shelters in our entire county. So we have no place to for our families to go or anybody else. So as far as the information flow, it's very similar to I'm sure all the rest of you guys. We have the district level, and then we call our advocates that you were calling advocates earlier, our point of contacts, our school point of contacts. And then of course they go out to personnel and direct contact to students also. Some of our point of contacts that we have are registrars, social workers, counselors, secretaries, and then some of our schools' principals are actually our point of contact. So we have a wide variety of backgrounds and interests that they have out there. What happened in Nye County is on March we've actually been closed since March the 6th, which is about a month earlier than most of the other West Coast schools closed. We closed on March the 6th because we had our spring break was started on March the 6th, and we just haven't come back from spring break ever since then. One of the things that we did for McKinney-Vento, I mean, as you well know, we all are very, very conscious of the relationships that we have with our, the relationships that we have with our community members. So let me tell you a little bit that might be a little different that from some of the larger cities that more rurals would has happened. Sometimes the smaller communities, we can get things done a lot faster. So what I've noticed with our community, at our community meetings, is that a lot of new programs have popped up very quickly to help respond to this. What I think is so interesting is the fact that we've been moving around in these circles for a long time. We know that all of these resources have been needed for our kids, but what has happened now is all of these people have come out of the woodwork and saying, oh my gosh, we have to help, because now it's them. right? It's no longer those kids that are needing help because they're considered homeless. It's now the possibility of them becoming homeless too. So people that have never, jumped into this field before or had a sense of connection to this field, they are now. And so they're really popping up a lot, and different types of programs are coming about. One of the things that they've done locally, and this is something that with us, a lot of the smaller communities have what they call one-stops. So whatever that agency is in your community, I would suggest you go to them and see what they might have. One of the new things has been with the use of the community health workers, which is part of the AmeriCorps program in our community, and that is they have been providing delivery of services. Right down to going and getting groceries and taking it out to their homes, and case management, which has been a really big help for a lot of those real severe cases that we handle. It's just another set of eyes and ears on that family that you can tap into, or we've been able to tap into to make those phone calls just to check on those families. Of course, we've collected, COVID-19 responses, and that has been real relevant to the population that we're serving. The other thing that just popped up the other day that I thought was really interesting, and I don't know, this hasn't been mentioned, but support groups. They have now put out a support group for anybody and everybody that just wants to be part of that and get some extra information. So we're going to be submitting or sending that information out to our families too. Something now interesting also, and I'm glad you had mentioned earlier, Tish, the fact that, there's all these different agencies that are coming up now and making donations, such as, I think you said Boys and Girls Club. Isn't that the company, isn't that who you were saying, Boys and Girls Club, and different types of agencies that are stepping up. In our smaller rural communities, we are having agencies. Well, for example, I'll just give you an example. Kinross Mine, which is one of the world's largest gold mines in the entire world, has from Nevada, we have a large gold mining community in our rural areas, and they have donated for us a large sum of money to be used specifically for the COVID response. About $15,000 is going to be going to a local agency just to provide food for our families. The other $15 is going to a family resource agency that will provide whatever is needed under the umbrella of what, how these people are being affected by COVID. So what I would say to those that are in rural is seek out some of your local community people that might have some money, and see what you can do as far as getting some donations that way. And I prefer to have it run through different agencies, and then we just respond to our families by doing referrals to those agencies. But just getting the word out that they're available, I think, is really important. As far as our district plan goes, we have a reentry team. And I was really happy that one of the reentry teams was actually named Family Needs and Resources. So they're actually thinking ahead that way and seeing what we need to do. What we were able to do is make up a resource list that included food banks, mental health, housing, utilities, Wi-Fi hotspots, things like that. We immediately sent that out to all of our POCs, all of our social workers. We posted on the website, we pushed it on Facebook, and actually now it's being reduced from a 7-page document down to a 2 or a 1-page document, front and back, and it will be going home with the food bags that are being distributed on a daily basis. So we'll be sending those out as well, because those seem to be those people most in need. So it's not just going to our McKinney-Vento families, even though that's who it will get to, but to all of the children in our district. The other thing that we were able to do, and fortunately our district was able to have Chromebooks available for every student. So that was really nice to be able to have. And for all students what we have done is provided them with a Wi-Fi pass for all of our school hotspots. We have been talking about what you had mentioned about taking out school buses and making them Wi-Fi hotspots. So that's something that we were looking at too in some of our more rural areas. And then something that just happened recently was we do have a McKinney-Vento grant, and we got permission that if for whatever reason, because a lot of these Chromebooks are going to be coming back now at the end of the school year, but we still are going to have some of our McKinney-Vento kids that are going to be doing summer school. And so we've actually been able to get permission to purchase with grant funds some Chromebooks if those are needed too. So that was nice to see. Special services, as far as our McKinney-Vento students, we are more rural, and if there is an emergency situation, we are able to go out and deliver those types of items. So if it's a food basket or something along those lines, because we have a storeroom and parents can't come in anymore, but we can take the proper precautions and go ahead and get that, whatever that might be, out to them. We were really fortunate. Literally the day before we shut down, we were able to send out hygiene bags with soap, shampoo, conditioners, all of that, those little good things, to every single one of our families. So wasn't a lot, but it was a little bit, and just for them to know that we were still here. One of the things that we are also doing, once again, it has a lot to do with a small community, and that is we have been able to purchase for the last, I don't know how many years, yearbooks for all of our seniors, and tassels, and invitations, announcements. So we had already been in the process of purchasing all of those. So those are still going to go out. We're going to try to make things as normal as possible for those students towards the end of the year. So we've got a plan to get those out in a pickup type of situation. We're not delivering those, but actually they'll be able to pick them up at the school. Somebody had also mentioned too is we don't want to be using our phones, our personal phones, to make phone calls to our families. So we have set up what we call a PBX Google phone. I don't know if you guys are using that or not, but basically it allows you to make a phone call from your computer. And the cool part about it is when it comes across to the recipient, it has our actual phone number from our office. So it doesn't show my personal phone number, it actually shows the phone number from the office. The unfortunate thing about that is if they try to call us back, they get our office, of which nobody is there. So we are checking phone messages on a regular basis. So that would be a barrier for us to have immediate contact. Barriers, of course, is distance and office hours, very similar to what you guys talked about in Clark County, and I'm sure everywhere else along the line. Some of the continuing and future plans that we have, we will be continuing to work with the community agencies, and we are the bridge between those community agencies and the schools. So whatever pops up in our community, we are kind of first line to try to get that out to the points of contact so they can deliver it on to their teachers that are actually having frontline contact with all the students and the parents. So we want to make sure that line that of communication flows that way. We also offer scholarships. So once again, going back to the fact that we want to make things as normal as we possibly can and continue, we are still awarding our scholarships. They just won't be awarded at a big, beautiful ceremony. But we are doing that, and we're happy to continue on with that because kids are going to continue to go on to college, and we want to make sure that they're able to do that. The other thing is we are planning summer school activities for our McKinney-Vento students. We used to offer 40 scholarships to go to a summer school program for our K through 5. And that program is not happening this year. So we've had to decide how we're going to reallocate that funding. So we're looking at mailing home books and packets for those students and providing it's still processed, but more than likely weekly contact through a Zoom meeting similar to this. And then, of course, just like what you had said earlier, is trying to expect and predict what we're going to be doing in the future because of the influx of McKinney-Vento students. This is going to not only affect this program, McKinney-Vento, but from, as I mentioned earlier, I'm the director of the pre-K program, which you have to be 200% of poverty in order to apply for that program. I have a hunch we're going to be getting a lot more children in that program too. So all the way across the board, I think is what we're going to be looking at in the future. So that's kind of what's going on in more rurals. As you can hear, it's very similar to what's going on in the larger communities. But I really would suggest and encourage all of those rural reps out there, rural liaisons, to seek out what your individual community has and let them know where your needs are. That's what I've got.
Thank you so much, Linda. Again, if you have any questions, please place them in the chat, and we'll take them after our last presenter. Also, this will be provided in a recording link following the session, and also the PowerPoint presentations will be provided. Nicole is up next. Nicole will introduce herself and do her presentation. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Tisha. Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Stewart, and hopefully you can hear me without too much distraction. My neighbor decided to do some wood chipping just as we got started, so why not? So I wanted to present a little bit about how we're taking care of ourselves while we're dealing with this current time. In thinking about what's working, what are our challenges, and what may be coming in the future. Every time I think about any of those things, I think about how are we doing this? Knowing how stressful and overwhelming our jobs were on a good day, recognizing that we are dealing currently with a global pandemic that is impacting us all in ways that we cannot control, in ways that we certainly didn't ask for. So I wanted to share a presentation today around the concept of how we support ourselves currently while we're in the midst of this, but also how we move forward. Because I know as advocates and liaisons, as Linda and Kelly Jo and others have said, like, we are kind of waiting for the influx. We know that what's happening right now is going to create ripple effects around houselessness and homelessness and poverty in our communities, and many of us will be tasked with that cleanup. So I wanted to provide a level of support for some of us today in a form of a presentation. So let me shift to present my slides. Okay. Are you able to see slides? Yeah. Okay. Because I can see my slides, but I can't see you all. So hopefully you can see both.
Yes, we can see both.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to do an overview of ways that we can take care of ourselves during these uncertain times. And so I'm going to start with a brief introduction. I'll share a little bit more about myself. Then I want to talk a little bit about where we are currently to give us a lay of the land and a little bit of perspective and orientation. Many of you are fully aware of stress and trauma, but I really want to talk about what kind, specific flavor that we're experiencing right now. And then we'll talk a little bit about radical self-care, resilience, and if you're open to it, a guided practice toward the end. So my name is Nicole Stewart. I'm a social worker, homeless liaison, and foster liaison in Milpitas, California. We are in Santa Clara County here in the Bay Area. And we are one of the first, I think we might be ground zero for COVID-19 is the conversation we're having now, that we may have had someone in February who passed of it initially. And our county has been very much on the forefront and out there publicly. Our last day of school was March 13th, Friday the 13th, because again, why not? And then we went immediately to distance learning March 16th. In my school district, we did a very good push out of Chromebooks to our McKinney-Vento students and any student who needed one right before we went out. And then about 2 weeks later, once we realized we were going to be pretty much out for the rest of the school year, we actually got kind of pulled apart our Chromebook carts that were in the classrooms, cleaned them all. A bunch of us got to go to school and cleaned Chromebooks for 4 hours. And then we distributed every single Chromebook we had on our high school campus to every student, any student who needed one. So I believe we've distributed almost 4,000 Chromebooks in our district. Myself and a few of our tech folks also have gone to our local shelters and hotels where some of our families are staying to make sure that they have Wi-Fi access and Chromebooks. So we're kind of, as many of you have said, we're all in this together. There's a lot of collaboration happening. And to Linda's point, right, many of us already knew about the need, and now other people are becoming aware of the need and reaching out with support, which is really beautiful. So in my district, there is a lot of collaboration happening. I don't feel so alone anymore. I know I have some city support, some county support, some state support, and eventually maybe some federal support. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is kind of our current landscape, where we are right now. We are in a global pandemic, and I initially started talking about this as a global trauma, but I think it's really important to be very careful about how we talk about this. This is a global stress that for some or many is traumatic. And I think that nuance is important because some folks are really experiencing a lot of pain and sorrow and even death right now, while others of us are maintaining, and it might even feel like a little bit of a vacation. And that's okay, either experience is fine. But just recognizing that what others might be feeling, we may not be, and that's okay. The cycles of grief and loss are very real right now. And again, no matter how small the loss or how seemingly insignificant the loss, it's really important for us as advocates to constantly validate that for those we serve, for ourselves, and for the people that are in our home quarantining with us. Especially, again, we work in schools, so kids are losing things that might seem trivial to us, like 8th grade graduation or kinder graduation or prom or signing yearbooks with friends and things like that. But recognizing that, if we can put ourselves back in those shoes, those were really big life events. Those are things that many of us still talk about and have pictures of. So we are also helping those that we serve grieve through this time. And we'll talk a little bit about what that grief cycle looks like. For many of you on this call, you are the caregivers both inside and outside of your home. That is something I really want us to hold to and be very clear about. Because I believe that for many of us, our burden is now magnified, right? We are the ones who are regulated in our work life, and we help regulate those who are dysregulated. And then in our home, we tend to be the hub of regulation as well for our spouses or for our partners or for our kids or even for our animals and pets, right? If mama's not okay, nobody's okay, right? So recognizing that in order for us to be that hub of normalcy and of support and of regulation, it really helps for us to be regulated. And also just acknowledging that many of us might be exhausted right now because we're having that extra caregiving happening all the time. We're giving. And then recognizing that we're all adjusting to this new normal, and new normal doesn't even feel like the right way to say it, but I think you all know what I mean with grace. But we will be, those of us who are in this space right now, who are liaisons and who have a handle on the needs of our families in good times, are going to be needed in the next several years to buffer the impact of what's happening right now. And I think it's really important for us, again, if we want to stay in this work, to fortify ourselves and build a level of resilience right now. I've been kind of talking about this time. It feels like a calm before the storm. I mean, there was a lot of work to do on the front end when we pulled away from school and did distance learning. But right now it feels a little bit like a lull because everybody's in their home, and in our county, evictions are halted. Our electric company is not shutting off, regardless of past due. There's a lot of supports to keep people housed and keep people where they are right now. Once those things lift, and then, we kind of see the domino effect of there's no work, there's no place to go, those things, we will be called on for opportunities, for collaboration, for support. And it's really important that we feel grounded and ready to do that. You guys, if anyone has seen any of my presentations at the conferences, I'm a big quote person, but I really appreciate this quote as a reminder, right? That though the thought that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic an expectation to be able to walk through water without getting wet. Again, recognizing that our jobs inherently expose us to suffering and loss. And right now, specifically, that suffering and loss is being expanded. And we might even be feeling it in different parts of our lives, whether we have relatives in other states who are suffering. Maybe we have suffered ourselves, have been sick, or had to deal with it in our immediate family. So recognizing that if you are feeling exhausted, if you are feeling heavy, If you are feeling overwhelmed or losing track of time, right? Like, what is time even? Like, recognize that those are aspects of trauma and of handling suffering and loss. And then there are some ways for us to be able to buffer. Just a brief, I left this slide in as an overview of different levels of stress. I don't know that this is positive stress for anyone, but certainly tolerable stress for some of us and toxic stress for many folks. So recognizing though where we are on that scale is really important, and that may shift from day to day. You know, we might one day feel like we're at the tolerable level and the next day it tips over to toxic. So just being aware of where we are on that scale is really important as well. And a lot of this is just about giving ourselves some grace and compassion to understand why we're in that funky mood or why we have that feeling in our body. And then, you know, give ourselves the space to take care of it. Many of you probably are very familiar with this as well, this grief cycle, but I just wanted to remind us because I think it's important to remember that this is kind of the reality of what we're dealing with. And this is, you know, the grief cycle is always kind of shared as a cycle, but it isn't cyclical, and these stages can kind of bounce around. You know, there are still some people in the shock and denial stage and they haven't moved beyond anything else. You can tell there are some people stuck in that anger stage of why are we doing this? And I'm going to, you know, go outside if I want to. And then I think right now some folks are feeling a little bit of that depression and detachment. I'm kind of feeling those waves as we're going through this time in my connection with our students and my staff. Right now it feels like a lot of depression and detachment, especially as proms and graduations are coming up. Then it kind of can shift to dialogue and bargaining. Again, I know some of our schools are talking about what does summer school look like and what does the fall look like. So we are starting to pivot and shift and bargain and say, okay, well, we can open up this way, or we can have this many people on campus, or we can do it this way. And that may be a longer cycle in this process as well. Hopefully, eventually we get to acceptance and returning to a meaningful life. And again, we may fall back into any one of these stages. These are always important kind of markers just to be able to pinpoint where we might be in our own emotions, in our own cycles. Yeah. And none of these stages are bad or good. They just are. So if you're stuck in that anger stage of frustration and why is this happening and this is the dumbest thing ever, that's okay. And then I do want to recognize the ways that this is impacting us right now. And I put vicarious in quote or in parentheses because for some of us, we are experiencing this vicariously, but some of us are experiencing it directly. And again, I just want to acknowledge that we are all in the same situation, but we are experiencing it very differently. Yeah. But this is impacting our brain, right? If we are absorbing other people's trauma while also trying to navigate what's going on for ourselves and what's happening in our households and make sure our boss knows that we're working those hours so we get that paycheck and, right, all the things that we're juggling. It's important to recognize how that is impacting our brain. I briefly mentioned the time thing, and I've been hearing a lot of people joke about that. Like, what is time? You know, an hour goes by so quickly, but then a whole day feels so slow. That's a part of our brain that's impacted in the limbic system. So when our brain is impacted by fear or that sense of stress, whether it's because it's something that we can't control, right? And that's usually stressful for many of us. That sense of time really does get messed with in our brain. So again, recognize you're not going crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. This is a normal response to this level of stress. Being forgetful, forgetting that meeting, that Zoom meeting that you have at 2 o'clock, or you know, forgetting what day it is. Those things are normal responses. That said, I think it's really important for us to recognize that, you know, when we talk about what's coming in the future and what's going to be needed for us to really be able to think about what our needs are or what the opportunities are and to collaborate in those and find solutions for those we serve, our brains are going to have to be online. So we're going to have to move a little bit out of that fear center of the brain and be able to pull up into our cortex, our neocortex, our thinking brain to do this work moving forward. So it's important for us to recognize where we are kind of in that space, and then pull into some tools to help us shift out of that timelessness and that sense of where are we, what day is it, which way is up. Yeah. This situation is certainly impacting our worldview, and that's another thing that we really have to keep in check. For some of us, I know there are folks in my family who are going way off the deep end to we are never coming back from this. Everything is different, right? Kind of going that way. And some of us are able to say, you know what, this is a moment in time. We will pivot. Things will get better. We'll come together and make this happen. So just recognizing, and again, that may change from day to day, from hour to hour, right? 1 hour, you might be like, we can do this. We're cool. Community's coming together. And then the next hour, everything feels futile. Right? Again, just noticing those shifts and changes in yourself and giving yourself a lot of grace and compassion. Our health is certainly being impacted right now. Obviously with the global pandemic itself, but recognizing that our immune system is being impacted by stress as well. And right now, especially, is an important time to strengthen our immune system and make sure it's really strong moving forward. So recognizing that sometimes we do things for self-preservation or for self-care in the short term that may have long-term negative impacts. I myself have had to be very aware of my eating habits during this shelter in place. And I know I'm not alone in that, but there's days when I forget to eat completely. And then there are days when I don't stop eating. So I've had to be very aware and present when I'm going into the kitchen because it's accessible way more often now than it was when I was working. And is the same with physical activity. When I was working, I had a very clear schedule and I was able to fit my workouts in. Now, again, there might be a few days where I'm just sitting on the couch on my computer doing Zoom meetings. And then I realize, why does my body hurt? So just paying attention to those cues is really important. And then finally, recognizing that our relationships are being impacted at this time. I think there were some jokes at the beginning of this about COVID babies. And then I think that very quickly shifted to COVID divorces. And I know people still joke about both of those things. But recognizing that, again, our work is already challenging and it already kind of put us in a strange place in our relationships where we're coming home with the stress, but we can't really talk about it because confidentiality and privacy. And also we're just trying to maintain, right? Recognizing that now we might be feeling a lot more heaviness. And what I'm also noticing, and I'm even hearing this from the students that I'm connecting with, is this like moodiness, just that, folks are feeling this and it's coming out in different ways. So young kids are having tantrums.
Yep.
And,
let's have breakfast. Can we have breakfast?
I'm not muted. So recognizing that, so some folks are just having moods, right? Mood swings. I have young kids having tantrums and the parents are like, why are they tantruming? And at the end of the tantrum, the kid will say, I miss my friends. Or, couples get kind of nipping at each other and recognizing, oh, we're nipping at each other because we used to actually have a level of separation where we weren't together all day. And then we came together for dinner and, we had our specific time, which was nice. So again, just recognizing any of the ways that this current situation is impacting us and giving ourselves a lot of grace and a lot of compassion. Some ways that we can help reduce the level of exposure, and there are a ton of ways to do this, but making sure you are taking some level of time to yourself, even if that means you have to go into a closet, a basement. I've actually been going into my car and sitting in my car for a little while with the sunroof open and just that's my moment. Because I have a few folks in my home with me and we're always on different calls and things like that. Also creating some level of a reasonable schedule. We don't have our 9 to 5 anymore, and that kind of is throwing us off of some rhythms. We're used to I get up at this time and I go get my coffee and then I go to work and then I do this and that and this. Creating some level of a schedule for yourself, but being really compassionate and giving yourself a lot more buffer. Give yourself 2 hours for lunch. Schedule that nap in the afternoon. Sleep in a little bit if you need to. You don't have to be at your computer at 6 a.m. unless your boss is making you, and then sorry about that. Also requesting support, reaching out and seeking help. This is a beautiful opportunity. And I want to thank Tisha for doing this presentation and allowing us to connect together so that we do have support and we can troubleshoot together. And then this is a big one, and many of you are probably already doing this naturally, but being very cautious of how we engage with traumatic content and engaging more with non-traumatic content. I've been joking with my husband that this is my time to really get into People magazine because there's no trauma in People magazine, or it's limited. They have their stories every now and then. But my ability to watch the news every day, like I used to be able to, like, I'm not doing that anymore. I know that I'll eventually get the update if it's big enough news. So, you know, limiting our exposure. And then really creating some tools to help us continue to buffer the impact or just interrupt that fight or flight response. So adopting basic self-care needs. And again, right now feels really weird to kind of put those things in place, but we have a little bit of that expansion of time to be able to do that. And right now is a really beautiful time to be able to put some self-care practices in place so that whatever we go back to, whatever that looks like, you already have some of those habits in place and can kind of adjust your schedule once we get kind of back online. Contemplative practices like yoga and meditation and mindfulness, I'm always going to be the one sharing those because I think they're wonderful and they're a really great way for us to connect back into a natural rhythm. We were really used to a rhythm of work, of 9 to 5, of go, 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 busy, 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 especially those of us who are one women or one men shows and where we are. And that rhythm, we got really used to that pace and that rhythm. And now we all got kind of just shut down all at once. And that rhythm just stopped. It didn't even slow down. It just stopped. And that's really disconcerting for a lot of us. And it's throwing our bodies off. So recognizing creating our own rhythm and our own pace is really important. And we can do that focusing on the breath, focusing on the body, focusing on the mind. And also this last bullet point, just finding ways to connect with joy and connect with nature. You know, like there will be times where my husband and I are here together and we have really, you know, it's just a tense day. And then something happens that'll just make us laugh and we'll just laugh until we cry. Right. And it's just in that brief moment of joy in the midst of all this other nonsense that we can take a moment, take a deep breath. And like we usually after that, just like, oh, that felt good. You know, just a nice little moment of joy. And then connecting with nature as much as we're able to. I know the shelter in place rules vary from place to place, no matter where you are. But we are allowed to walk outside in our neighborhoods. I'm lucky enough to have a dog, so I get to walk twice a day. But also just connecting in some way to nature, going out on our porch, looking out a window, taking a walk. That's another rhythm that we can get really used to, is that rhythm of nature. Watching water, watching the wind in the trees, anything that's available to you is really important. I'm going to keep moving quickly because I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. Brief kind of general self-care. Again, these things can be rolling. I know there are moments, days when you're on top of it and you're like, I'm going to work out today or I'm going to drink my water today. And then days, weeks that go by and that doesn't happen. But just remembering that these are really important. And sleep right now, restful sleep or rest is very, very important. Again, for those of us who are going to be asked to figure out how we move forward and we're going to be experiencing an influx potentially of homelessness, it's really important that we rest as much as we can right now because it feels like a bit of a lull and then we're going to be off to the races. I always share in my presentations about this concept of caring for others without carrying them. And this is a really good one to practice right now. And for me, the practice is just saying that, you know, when I get a call about a family or a student in need, you know, last week I got a 4 a.m. text message from a student saying, I really need to talk to you. I'm really overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. And I make very clear to my students that they can contact me anytime, but that I only respond within certain hours, you know, very clear boundaries. And just like Linda said, we don't have kids, you know, texting us directly. We do an app called Go to Connect. So when I send a text message or a phone call from my cell phone, it looks as though it's coming from the school district. So, and then they can call what looks like my school district number and it comes to my cell phone. So, but I had the student text me at 4 a.m. and she was very overwhelmed. And, you know, of course I got the text message early because it woke me up, and I immediately felt the weight of carrying. I thought, oh my gosh, I need to call her back right away, right? This could be a big deal. But I reminded myself that she knows my barriers. And she even said, I know you won't get this until tomorrow. And I just really said to myself, you know, I can care without carrying. I'll call her tomorrow, first thing in the morning, and she'll be fine. And I was able to go back to sleep, and I did call her the next day and she was fine. And we just talked around, you know, she was upset because she is a track athlete and doesn't have her last season of track. And it was supposed to be prom that weekend as well. So I think everything was compounding, and she needed a moment to release. But just this understanding of how we can care for folks without carrying them And that's how we can move forward doing this work, taking care of a lot of folks.
And Nicole, we are over our time for the day. So maybe if you could just close this up here. And if anyone has additional questions, please go ahead and just email me the questions. We'll make sure that all of your questions are addressed. All the presentations will be made available to you, and also the link to the recording. I know some of you have been running over with other meetings, so feel free to check out the recorded link. It'll be provided in the next day or two. If you could go ahead and close this out, Nicole.
Absolutely, yeah. The slides will be available for you, and just reminding us to take care of ourselves during this time, because again, we are going to be needed in the next several years, and people will be looking to us for leadership and for guidance on how to do this and how to move forward. So stand in our power, remind ourselves of the amazing work that we do, and take care of ourselves and each other during this time.
Thank you, Nicole. Any final words from Meg or Linda?
Nope.
Linda, anything from you?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you all for joining us. Please take care of yourselves. We appreciate you and everything that you do. For all of you who put emails there in the chat box, I'll make sure that I get those down and send you the presentations. If you want to receive anything other than today, also please let me know that. And again, the recorded links will be made available as well. Please look at our resource page on COVID-19 at the NACCE website, nacce.org, for additional information, additional resources, and links. Again, thank you so much for everything you do. We appreciate you so much. Take care of yourselves. We love you. Bye-bye now.